In a quiet suburban town in the United States, Ethan Miller, a devoted husband, leaves home at 6 a.m. each morning for his demanding office job. His wife, Sarah Miller, stays behind to care for their two young children, Liam and Chloe, while managing the endless responsibilities of their household. The story follows Sarah's daily challenges, emotional strength, and unwavering dedication as she balances childcare, chores, and her own dreams. Each chapter reveals the unseen effort behind a mother's day, the bond within the Miller family, and how love, patience, and resilience shape their lives. Ethan Miller woke before the sun, the soft red glow of the bedside clock showing 5:27 a.m. The house was completely still, wrapped in the quiet of early morning. Sarah slept beside him, her breathing slow and peaceful, unaware of the long day waiting for her. Ethan sat up carefully, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, trying not to wake her. His body felt heavy, already tired before the day had even begun. He looked at Sarah for a moment, admiring the calm on her face, knowing that in a few hours she would be juggling two small children, endless chores, and the non-stop rhythm of the home. He stood slowly, the floor cool under his feet, as he moved toward the bathroom. The mirror reflected a tired man preparing for another long shift. He splashed water on his face, the cold waking him fully. When he stepped back into the hallway, he paused outside the kids' room. Through the cracked door, he saw Liam sprawled across his bed, blanket half on the floor, and Chloe sleeping peacefully in her crib. He smiled softly, knowing how chaotic they would be later. Downstairs, the early light barely reached the kitchen. He started the coffee machine, the smell filling the quiet room. This moment, the silence before sunrise, was the part of the day he secretly appreciated. No crying, no rushing, no noise, just a few minutes of calm. Upstairs, Sarah woke to the faint sound of movement. She blinked, sat up slowly, and tied her robe around her as she walked downstairs. Ethan was buttoning his shirt when she entered. She fixed his collar with tired hands and offered a small smile. They spoke softly, sharing the familiar warmth of their morning routine. She packed his lunch while he put on his shoes, and they exchanged a quick goodbye, a kiss, and soft reminders to take care of themselves. When he stepped outside, the cold air rushed into the house for a moment before she closed the door behind him. The house fell silent again, only for a minute. At 6:23 a.m., the baby monitor crackled with Chloe's cry. Sarah took a deep breath, climbed the stairs, and entered the warm, dimly lit room. Chloe stood in her crib, arms reaching out, her hair messy from sleep. Sarah lifted her, rocking her gently, whispering comforting words. She carried her downstairs, the sky beginning to lighten outside. She placed Chloe in her high chair and began preparing breakfast, the quiet house slowly waking around her. This was the beginning of her long day, and she embraced it with the tired but steady patience she had learned as a mother. The house would soon be full of noise and movement, but for now, she breathed in the soft morning air and gathered her strength for everything ahead. The morning moved forward slowly as Sarah prepared Chloe's oatmeal, stirring it gently while the little girl kicked her feet against the high chair tray. The sky outside shifted from deep blue to pale gray, signaling the beginning of another busy day. Sarah placed the warm bowl in front of Chloe and watched her tiny hands reach eagerly for the spoon. Half of the oatmeal made it into her mouth, the other half landing on her cheeks, her bib, and the high chair. Sarah smiled even through her tiredness, wiping Chloe's chin with the corner of a cloth. Just as she turned toward the sink, a soft thump echoed from upstairs. A moment later came the small, sleepy voice she knew so well. Liam had woken up. She wiped her hands and made her way up the stairs, already guessing that he was probably sitting on the edge of his bed, eyes half open, hair sticking up like he had fought a tornado in his sleep. She pushed open the door to find exactly that. Liam blinked at her, rubbing his eyes with both fists. He didn't say a word, only lifted his arms toward her. She scooped him up, feeling the warm weight of his small body settle against her shoulder. His voice was groggy as he mumbled her name. She carried him downstairs, kissing the top of his head, and set him gently on the couch. In the kitchen, Chloe banged her spoon cheerfully, oatmeal splattering in new directions. Liam leaned into Sarah, too sleepy to complain. She handed him a small blanket and turned on a children's show to ease him into the morning. The familiar melody filled the quiet house, mixing with the soft clatter of dishes as Sarah cleaned Chloe's messy tray. She worked quickly, knowing how fast the morning could shift from calm to chaos. When Chloe finished her breakfast, Sarah lifted her from the high chair and placed her on the living room rug with a few toys. Liam joined her slowly, watching her stack soft blocks and knock them over again. Sarah sat on the floor beside them for a moment, stretching her tired legs. For a few peaceful minutes, both children were quiet, lost in their little world of toys. She watched them, grateful for these pockets of calm that helped her breathe. But the peace didn't last long. Liam began asking for cereal, then juice, then the blue cup instead of the green one. Chloe started pulling herself up on the coffee table, nearly toppling over. Sarah moved quickly, shifting from one task to another, pouring cereal, catching Chloe, picking up spilled milk, wiping little hands. The rhythm was constant, familiar, and exhausting. By mid-morning, the living room floor was already scattered with toys, sippy cups, and tiny socks. Sarah had folded a load of laundry, only for Chloe to crawl over and pull half of it onto the floor again. Liam insisted on wearing his dinosaur shirt, then changed his mind 2 minutes later. The cycle repeated, cleaning, soothing, directing, encouraging, an endless loop she navigated without pause. Yet, even in the middle of the mess, there were moments that made it all worth it. Liam wrapped his arms around her legs for no reason at all. Chloe giggled each time she wobbled, and Sarah caught her. Their laughter filled the house, warm and bright, pushing away the heaviness of the early morning. Still, she felt her energy slipping. She glanced at the clock. It was only 10:15 a.m. Ethan had been gone for hours, and there were still so many more ahead of her before he would return. She sighed, picking up toys scattered across the couch, already knowing they would reappear minutes later. But she kept going. She always did, because this was her world, her daily storm, her quiet strength at work. With a deep breath, she gathered the kids for snack time, preparing herself for the next part of the day, one small moment at a time. By late morning, the sun finally pushed through the thin clouds, filling the Miller house with soft, warm light. Sarah opened the curtains in the living room, letting the brightness spill across the floor where Liam and Chloe were playing. The light made everything feel a little easier, even though her body already felt tired from the non-stop morning. She walked into the kitchen to prepare a small snack. Cut apple slices for Liam and tiny soft crackers for Chloe, the kind that melted quickly in her mouth. Liam ran into the kitchen, his energy rising as the morning wore on. He leaned against her leg, talking quickly about his toys, about dinosaurs, about something he saw on TV. His little voice never seemed to pause, his excitement never slowing. Sarah smiled as she placed the apple slices in a bowl and handed it to him. He grabbed it eagerly and ran back to the living room. When she returned with Chloe's snack, she found Liam sitting cross-legged on the rug, lining up his toy cars. Chloe sat beside him, fascinated by the bright colors. Sarah settled on the floor beside them, handing Chloe her crackers. Chloe squealed with happiness, clapping her hands before stuffing one into her mouth. For a while, Sarah stayed on the floor with them, enjoying the rare moment when both kids were quiet and content. But soon Liam grew restless again. He got to his feet, ran to the hallway, and called for his shoes. Sarah laughed under her breath, shaking her head. She knew what that meant. Liam wanted to go outside. She stood up slowly, gathered Chloe into her arms, and went to find Liam's shoes. He bounced happily as she helped him put them on. Chloe's tiny shoes came next, her legs kicking excitedly, as if she already knew they were going out. They stepped onto the backyard porch, greeted by a cool breeze and the earthy smell of the grass. Liam ran toward the small plastic slide, climbing up and sliding down again and again. Chloe sat near the steps, watching him with wide eyes. Sarah set her down gently on the soft grass, staying close as Chloe explored the ground, picking up leaves, dropping them, and laughing at every new texture she discovered. For a few minutes, the outside world felt peaceful. Birds chirped in the trees. The neighborhood was quiet. Sarah sat on the patio step, watching her kids play, feeling the chill of the breeze against her face. These moments, simple, ordinary, unplanned, were the ones she cherished most. They reminded her that motherhood wasn't only about cleaning and cooking and rushing. It was also about watching her children discover the world. But the peace didn't last long. Liam started climbing the slide from the wrong side, slipping, asking for help, then insisting he could do it alone. Chloe crawled toward a flower bed, grabbing fistfuls of dirt. Sarah stood quickly, brushing the dirt gently from Chloe's hands before she could taste any of it. Liam called her again. She shifted her attention back and forth, trying to keep both kids safe and happy at the same time. After 20 minutes, the wind grew colder and Chloe began rubbing her eyes. Liam complained about wanting water. Sarah decided it was time to go back inside. She carried Chloe in one arm and held Liam's hand as they stepped into the warm house, closing the door behind them. The shift from outdoors to indoors brought an immediate new list of tasks to her mind. Lunchtime was coming. She placed Chloe in her playpen with a few toys and helped Liam wash his hands. He hummed loudly, splashing water everywhere. Sarah wiped his hands, dried the sink, and guided him to the table. She reheated leftover pasta, cut it into small pieces, and added vegetables for both kids. Chloe, now fully awake again, banged her tray impatiently. Liam tapped his fingers on the table, asking questions faster than she could answer them. She served their food, then ate a few bites standing up while cleaning the counter. Sitting down to eat felt like a luxury she rarely had. Between wiping spills, cutting extra bites, and keeping Chloe from tossing her cup on the floor, Sarah barely tasted her own food. By the time lunch was over, both children were messy and restless again. Chloe needed a diaper change. Liam wanted his favorite blanket. Toys had multiplied across the living room floor as if they grew on their own. Sarah moved through the house with quiet determination, picking up, helping, soothing, and cleaning, her steps steady but weary. When she finally glanced at the clock, she realized it was still only early afternoon. Hours remained before Ethan would be home. She exhaled slowly, collecting her strength once more. The day was far from over, but she kept going, guided by nothing more than love, patience, and the commitment she carried deep within her. The early afternoon settled into the house like a heavy blanket, warm and slow. Sarah carried Chloe upstairs for her nap, the little girl's head resting against her shoulder, her tiny fingers curled loosely around the edge of Sarah's shirt. Each step up the staircase felt like it required a little more effort than the last, the weight of the day already pressing on her muscles. She pushed open the door to the children's room, the soft scent of baby powder and freshly washed sheets filling the air. Chloe let out a tiny sigh as Sarah laid her gently in the crib, covering her with a lightweight blanket. For a moment, Sarah stood still, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall in steady rhythms. These quiet moments, rare and fragile, became her anchor. She left the room as quietly as she could, pulling the door until it stopped just before the latch clicked. Liam was in the hallway, sitting on the carpet with his toy truck, running it back and forth in short, energetic bursts. He looked up at her with wide eyes, his voice loud in the quiet corridor as he asked if his sister was asleep yet. She pressed a finger to her lips, nodding softly, and he mirrored the gesture with exaggerated seriousness, giggling silently. Downstairs, the house felt different with one child asleep. Not exactly calm, but less chaotic. Liam followed her into the kitchen, asking if he could help with anything. His little feet padded behind her, his voice bouncing off the walls with endless questions. Why do clouds float? Where does the sun sleep? Why can't he have a pet dinosaur? She answered the questions she could, redirected the ones she couldn't, and started tidying up the remains of lunchtime. The plates, the half-empty cups, the crumbs scattered like confetti across the table. Liam wandered to the living room, where sunlight pooled across the rug. He picked up his crayons, choosing his favorite color, a bright, almost neon green, and began scribbling with fierce concentration. Sarah watched him from the kitchen doorway, grateful for this moment of quiet focus. She leaned against the wall for a few seconds longer than she needed to, letting her eyes close, her breath slowing, as she tried to gather enough energy for the rest of the afternoon. But rest was short-lived. Liam called her name, asking her to look at his drawing. She walked over and knelt beside him, admiring the tangle of colorful lines he had proudly created. He said it was a dragon, or maybe a car, or maybe both. She praised him anyway, brushing a hand gently over his soft hair. He beamed at her, the simple joy on his face giving her a small but much-needed boost. After a while, Liam grew bored of drawing and ran toward the couch, climbing onto the cushions and bouncing lightly. Sarah reminded him not to jump too high, knowing that excitement could turn into tears in seconds. He climbed down after a moment and instead grabbed his basket of blocks, pouring them onto the floor with the loud clatter of plastic hitting hardwood. She winced at the sound, glancing upstairs, hoping Chloe wouldn't wake up early. She sat on the floor to help Liam build a tall tower, guiding his small hands as he stacked one block on top of the other. The tower grew taller, wobbling slightly as Liam added more pieces. His face lit up with pride, his tongue poking out in concentration. When it finally fell over, scattering blocks all around them, he shrieked with laughter. Sarah laughed too, even though the mess meant more cleaning later. She leaned forward, tickling him gently until he squirmed with giggles. The minutes passed and folded into each other as she moved through the tasks of the afternoon, cleaning the kitchen, sweeping the floor, putting away toys, folding laundry. Each task seemed simple on its own, but the constant interruptions, questions from Liam, spills, toys suddenly appearing underfoot, made the work feel endless. Still, she kept going, her movements steady and practiced. When Chloe stirred from her nap and began to cry, Sarah wiped her hands on a towel and headed back upstairs. Liam trailed behind her, calling out to his sister before they even reached the door. Inside, Chloe stood in her crib, her cheeks flushed from sleep, her hair a messy halo around her head. She reached out toward Sarah immediately, her tiny voice trembling with leftover sleepiness. Sarah lifted her and settled her on her hip, swaying gently as she rubbed her back. Liam hovered nearby, eager to help. He handed his sister one of her stuffed animals, proudly declaring himself the big helper. Chloe held the toy against her chest and rested her head on Sarah's shoulder. For a few quiet moments, they stood together in the soft afternoon light, the two children pressed close to their mother, forming a small, warm cluster of comfort. But as soon as they went downstairs, the rhythm changed again. Chloe wanted a snack, Liam wanted a different snack. The toy basket overturned again, and Sarah found herself juggling both children at once, one crying for a banana, the other insisting he needed his dinosaur shirt right away. She moved quickly, trying to soothe and organize at the same time, her patience stretched thin but holding steady. The hours continued like this, shifts of calm and chaos, small laughs, small frustrations, tiny moments of rest, and nonstop movement. And still, the clock on the wall seemed to move slower than ever. Sarah glanced at the time and felt a familiar ache settle into her shoulders. Ethan wouldn't be home for at least a few more hours. She inhaled deeply, gathered the kids close, and prepared herself for the rest of the day, knowing she would keep going the same way she always did, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. The late afternoon sun filtered through the living room windows, casting warm, golden streaks across the scattered toys and the soft rug. Sarah Miller sat on the floor with Liam and Chloe, trying to make the most of the fading quiet before the evening rush began. Chloe was busy stacking small blocks with determination, her tiny fingers carefully placing each piece, while Liam built a bridge of toy cars, moving them back and forth with a kind of energetic focus that only a 3-year-old could maintain. Sarah smiled at the sight, her body aching but her heart warmed by the simple joy radiating from her children. The calm, however, was fleeting. Chloe's stack tumbled almost immediately, and she let out a small wail, reaching for Sarah's arms. Liam's bridge collapsed at the same time, and he threw his hands up in dramatic frustration. Sarah scooped Chloe up in one arm and ruffled Liam's hair with the other, murmuring words of comfort to both. The chaos was constant, the pace relentless, but she moved through it with a quiet, practiced rhythm, a kind of dance only a mother could understand. Soon, hunger began to make itself known. Liam tugged at her sleeve, insisting it was snack time again, while Chloe gurgled impatiently in her mother's arms. Sarah sighed softly, setting Chloe down carefully and preparing a small plate of fruit for both children. She cut the slices into tiny pieces, arranging them neatly on the plates, as Chloe babbled excitedly, reaching for each piece. Liam, meanwhile, hovered nearby, careful not to knock anything over but eager to get the first bite. Sarah smiled, handing each of them their snacks, listening to the soft crunch of fruit as they ate. By the time the snacks were finished, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, and the light in the room took on a more muted tone. Shadows stretched across the floor, and Sarah realized it was almost time to start preparing dinner. She glanced at the clock, noting that Ethan still had a couple of hours before he would walk through the front door. Her thoughts drifted briefly to him, wondering how his day had gone, whether he had eaten lunch, whether he was tired in the same way she was. She shook her head, pushing aside the fleeting worry, and focused on the immediate task, keeping 2 small children engaged and happy while she set about the next wave of household duties. Liam had grown restless again. He stood up, declaring that he wanted to play outside once more. Chloe, seeing him move, began to squeal, wanting to follow. Sarah groaned quietly, knowing the backyard was muddy from a recent rain and that the cooler air would require jackets, socks, and a series of other small preparations. Still, she bent down to gather the jackets, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders. Leon impatiently tugged at his sleeve, while Chloe wriggled in her mother's arms. Sarah dressed them both, each layer a minor battle of cooperation and protest, before finally opening the back door. The air outside was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of the neighborhood's trees and grass. Liam ran toward the slide, climbing eagerly, while Chloe toddled carefully behind him, one hand held in Sarah's. She watched them with a mix of amusement and caution, noting the careful way Chloe navigated the uneven grass and the reckless speed with which Liam climbed and slid down the plastic slide again and again. Birds chirped nearby, and a light breeze moved through the leaves, bringing a moment of calm to the otherwise energetic backyard. Sarah felt a brief sense of peace, enjoying the sounds of her children's laughter and the softness of the afternoon light. But the peace was temporary. Liam started chasing after Chloe, calling her name and laughing loudly, while Chloe began to toddle in a different direction, reaching for flowers and examining dirt. Sarah moved quickly to intercept, holding Chloe's hands and gently redirecting her towards safer play. Liam protested briefly, but when he saw his sister smiling at him, he calmed and returned to the slide. The rhythm of constant attention, guidance, and correction was familiar to Sarah, almost second nature at this point. She moved between them, a steady presence, guiding, lifting, soothing, and laughing in small bursts. Soon, the backyard playtime drew to an end. The shadows lengthened further, and the chill of early evening began to settle in. Sarah called the children inside, reminding them softly to take off their shoes and jackets. Chloe clung to her leg as she carried her toward the door, while Liam marched ahead, careful to follow instructions this time. Once inside, Sarah began setting the table for dinner, organizing ingredients, and keeping an eye on the children as they moved around her. Chloe, now more awake and energized after the brief outdoor play, explored the living room, grabbing toys and inspecting the furniture. Liam wandered nearby, fidgeting and asking endless questions about the food Sarah was preparing. She answered some and redirected others, keeping her patience intact, though her body ached from the hours of activity. The kitchen was filled with the sounds of clinking utensils, the occasional giggle from the children, and the low hum of the oven preheating. Dinner preparation continued with careful multitasking. Sarah chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and prepared the plates, occasionally wiping a child's hands or cleaning up small spills. Liam sat nearby, occasionally helping to hand her ingredients, while Chloe toddled between the kitchen and living room, occasionally bumping into furniture, always under her mother's watchful eye. The evening light created a warm glow in the kitchen, contrasting with the cool shadows elsewhere, and Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction in the midst of the chaos. The day was far from over, but she was managing, as she always did. By the time dinner was almost ready, Ethan was calling from the driveway, signaling his arrival. Sarah felt a small surge of relief, knowing she would soon have a partner to share the remaining tasks of the day. She called the children to the table, preparing for the final segment of their long day together. Liam ran toward the dining area, while Chloe toddled beside Sarah, reaching for her mother's hand for stability. The family would soon be reunited, the final hours of the day approaching, and the rhythm of care and attention would continue, but now with Ethan by her side to share in the laughter, cleanup, and quiet moments of reflection. The sound of the front door opening carried through the house, followed by the familiar echo of Ethan's footsteps. Sarah turned from the kitchen, smiling as he stepped inside, briefcase in hand, shoulders slightly slumped from the weight of a long day at the office. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the exhaustion between them shared a quiet understanding. The children, sensing his arrival, rushed toward him, Liam running with unrestrained energy, Chloe toddling after him with tiny steps that wobbled but didn't falter. Ethan knelt down, opening his arms wide, and both children flung themselves into his embrace. The sound of laughter filled the room, breaking through the residual tension of the afternoon. Sarah placed a pot of food on the counter, watching the family reunion unfold. She felt a quiet pride, knowing she had managed the day's chaos while Ethan was away. The simple joy of seeing him interact with their children reminded her why all the hard work, the exhaustion, and the endless chores mattered. For a few minutes, she simply watched, letting herself absorb the warmth of the moment before stepping forward to greet him properly. Ethan looked at her with a tired smile, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Dinner was ready, and Sarah guided the children to the table. Chloe sat in her high chair, reaching for the plate of food with eager anticipation. Liam climbed into his chair, chatting non-stop about the events of his day. Ethan pulled out a chair for himself, sitting down beside Sarah. The family began to eat together, a rhythm of conversation, laughter, and the occasional correction filling the air. Sarah served small portions to the children, ensuring Chloe had soft bites that she could manage on her own. Liam's energy overflowed, but he listened to Ethan's gentle guidance and Sarah's quiet encouragement as they ate. For a few minutes, Sarah allowed herself a small portion of food, sitting back to watch the family in motion. Ethan leaned slightly toward her, whispering a quick word of thanks for managing the day so efficiently. She smiled in return, the shared acknowledgement between them, unspoken but understood. The children continued their chatter, filling the room with stories of imaginary adventures and small victories from the day. Chloe babbled and laughed, occasionally dropping her spoon, but quickly picking it up again. Liam demonstrated his favorite toy car maneuver, revving it across the table with dramatic flair. The kitchen table, scattered with plates, utensils, and small crumbs, became a stage for the family's dynamic. Ethan and Sarah exchanged small smiles, quietly coordinating attention between the two children. Chloe began to reach toward the edge of the high chair, wanting to explore the floor. Sarah moved instinctively, setting a small toy in front of her to redirect her attention. Liam, noticing a mismatch of colors on his plate, asked for a swap, and Ethan carefully guided him through sharing space and making choices calmly. The flow of interaction, though chaotic, was filled with love and understanding. Once dinner was finished, Sarah cleared the table while Ethan tended to washing the dishes, a rotation they had perfected over time. Liam and Chloe moved to the living room with a few toys, their energy still high but contained within the safe space of the room. Sarah and Ethan worked together in the kitchen, the routine of cleanup almost meditative after the high-energy chaos of the day. Plates were rinsed, counters wiped, and the scent of the evening lingered in the air. Sarah felt a small but meaningful sense of accomplishment. The family was fed, the kitchen clean, and the house settling into the softer rhythms of the night. After dishes were done, Ethan joined the children on the living room floor. Liam held a toy car, and Chloe waved a stuffed animal in the air. Ethan sat cross-legged, engaging fully with both, asking questions, making silly faces, and joining in their imaginative play. Sarah observed quietly from the doorway, sipping a cup of tea she had managed to pour for herself. The scene was ordinary, yet profound, the culmination of their daily efforts, the children's laughter filling the home with life, the parents working in tandem to create balance and joy despite the exhaustion that tugged at their bodies. The evening gradually shifted toward bedtime. Sarah led Chloe upstairs for her bath, the small girls splashing happily while Sarah gently washed her hair. Liam followed, excited to tell his father about an imaginary dinosaur he had created. Ethan listened, laughing and nodding as Sarah dressed Chloe in fresh pajamas, the soft fabric comforting against her small skin. Once Chloe was ready, Sarah carried her to the bedroom, rocking her gently until her eyes grew heavy and she fell asleep. Liam brushed his teeth with Sarah's guidance, then climbed into bed with a favorite blanket, eager to recount the adventures of the day one last time. By the time the children were finally asleep, the house had fallen into a quiet stillness. Sarah and Ethan sat together on the couch, exhausted but content. The day had been long, filled with the demands and unpredictability of caring for two young children, but it was also filled with moments of connection, laughter, and love. They shared a quiet conversation, reflecting briefly on the day's events, their words soft in the evening glow. Even in the midst of fatigue, they found small moments to acknowledge each other's efforts. Each glance and touch carried the unspoken understanding of shared responsibility. As the night deepened, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house became the backdrop for their quiet evening. Sarah leaned against Ethan's shoulder, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly now that they were together. Ethan held her hand, squeezing gently, a silent thank you for the countless small tasks she had managed alone throughout the day. The children slept peacefully upstairs, unaware of the labor, patience, and love that had carried them through the day. Sarah allowed herself a deep breath, letting the calm seep in, the kind of calm that comes after surviving yet another day of non-stop care and attention. For a brief moment, the house felt like a sanctuary. The chaos, laughter, mess, and noise had all settled into a rhythm of quiet evening stillness. Sarah reflected on the day, thinking of all the small victories and challenges she had navigated. She thought of the laughter, the minor frustrations, the spills, the messes, the hugs, the kisses, and the constant presence of responsibility. Each moment had been demanding, yet each moment was also filled with love, shaping the life of their family in ways that would go unnoticed by anyone outside their home. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes only after the children are asleep and the last dishes are put away. Sarah moved through the living room, picking up stray toys and stacking them carefully in their baskets. Liam's little cars were lined up along the bookshelf, Chloe's blocks stacked haphazardly but neatly enough for the moment. The soft glow of the lamp filled the room with a warm light, making the shadows long and soft across the floor. She paused for a moment, taking in the calm before the night fully settled in, and allowed herself a small sigh of relief. Ethan joined her in the living room, leaning against the doorway and brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. He had changed into more comfortable clothes, the stiffness of his office day still visible in the way he moved. "Long day?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, brushing her hands together as if to shake off the last remnants of activity. "The usual," she said softly, a small smile lifting the corners of her mouth. They exchanged a glance that said everything: the exhaustion, the relief, the quiet satisfaction of managing another day together. Sarah sat down on the couch, her shoulders heavy from hours of constant movement, while Ethan sank beside her. They let the silence fill the room for a few moments, the kind of comfortable silence that only comes from shared understanding and familiarity. The children were upstairs, deep in sleep, unaware of the world around them or the effort that had gone into keeping them fed, entertained, and safe. Sarah sipped a warm cup of tea she had poured for herself, the steam curling upward and carrying the faint scent of honey. Ethan reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You did well today," he said quietly. Sarah gave a small smile, squeezing his hand back. "We did well," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. They sat together in quiet companionship, letting the fatigue of the day settle into a peaceful exhaustion, the kind that comes from constant care and attention, but also from love and connection. Outside, the last traces of sunlight faded from the sky. The neighborhood had grown silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Inside, the house felt like a sanctuary, the chaos of the day replaced by soft shadows and gentle warmth. Sarah allowed herself to reflect for a moment on the small victories of the day, the way Liam had listened at snack time, the way Chloe had laughed when her tower of blocks fell, and the moments of connection with Ethan that reminded her they were navigating life together. The evening stretched on, quiet but full. Sarah and Ethan moved slowly through the room, tidying a few items that had been missed earlier, straightening cushions, folding a small blanket left on the floor. It was not much, but the act of putting things in order brought a sense of closure to the day. They exchanged small smiles, small words of encouragement, and quiet laughter at minor mishaps: a fallen cup, a toy rolling under the couch, the way Lamb had insisted on wearing his favorite dinosaur shirt all day even though it had been stained. Soon, they both leaned back on the couch, exhaustion pressing against them like a familiar weight. Sarah thought briefly about tomorrow, the cycle of early mornings, constant movement, and endless care, but she pushed the thought aside, allowing herself to rest in the present. The children would wake again, and she would be ready to face their energy and needs. For now, though, she could simply exist in the quiet, let the house breathe, and feel the small moments of peace that came after the storm of a typical day. Ethan brushed a hand across her arm, a gentle reminder that he was there, sharing the burden silently with her. They sat for a while longer, letting the soft glow of the lamp wash over them. In the living room, the toys rested in their baskets, the kitchen was quiet, and the house seemed to exhale along with them. Every day was demanding, every day required patience, but the small victories, the quiet moments, and the shared love made it all bearable. Sarah rose to her feet, stretching slightly, and walked to the kitchen to check that everything was in order before heading to bed. Ethan followed, glancing around the house with her. A quick glance at the clock reminded them that soon the next day would begin, the cycle repeating itself. But for now, there was this quiet, soft interlude. The children slept soundly upstairs, unaware of the effort and love that had carried them through the day. Sarah placed a hand gently on the railing, peering briefly into the children's room, and smiled at the peacefulness of their faces. Back in the living room, Sarah and Ethan returned to the couch for a final moment of quiet companionship. They held hands loosely, shoulders touching, enjoying the warmth of the room and the feeling of togetherness that came from surviving another day. There were no words, no need for them, only the presence of each other and the knowledge that they had done their best for their children, for their family. The house hummed softly around them, the gentle rhythm of life continuing quietly into the night. Eventually, Sarah rose again, gathering the small items still left out, cups, toys, blankets, and placed them where they belonged. Ethan followed, helping silently, their movements coordinated without conversation. Once the house was in order, they headed upstairs, changing into pajamas and brushing teeth, small routines that marked the end of the day. The children stirred slightly in their sleep, but remained peaceful, lulled by the evening's quiet and the gentle presence of their parents nearby. As they finally climbed into their own bed, Sarah and Ethan exchanged a soft, tired smile. Another day had passed, demanding and relentless, but filled with moments of joy, love, and connection. They lay side by side, feeling the weight of the day in their muscles, but the lightness in their hearts. Outside, the world had grown dark, the night deep and still. Inside, the house was warm and safe, a sanctuary shaped by the constant care and attention of two devoted parents. For now, all was quiet, and for a brief moment, they allowed themselves to simply rest together. The morning light seeped through the curtains, spilling soft gold across the Miller household. Sarah awoke first, her eyes adjusting slowly to the brightness. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt fleeting and fragile, but precious nonetheless. She lay still for a moment, savoring the rare peace before the children stirred. Her body ached lightly, the accumulated weight of the past weeks settling in her muscles, but she pushed it aside, allowing herself a brief mental stretch before the day officially began. Liam was the first to wake, his small voice calling softly from his bed. Sarah rose carefully, tiptoeing across the room to him. He sat up, rubbing his eyes and yawning widely. She smiled gently, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Good morning, my big boy," she whispered. He grinned back, still half asleep, and reached for her hand. Together they went downstairs, Chloe already stirring in her crib, babbling softly as Sarah lifted her into her arms. The kitchen held the quiet aroma of brewed coffee, left warm from Ethan's early preparation. Sarah set Chloe in her high chair and handed Liam a piece of toast as they began their morning routine. The children ate slowly, Chloe dropping pieces of her breakfast in small bursts, Liam asking endless questions about the day ahead. Sarah answered patiently, guiding them through the motions, brush teeth, get dressed, pack small backpacks with toys or snacks for later. After breakfast, Liam wanted to go outside to play in the yard, and Chloe attempted to follow, grabbing at anything within reach. Sarah moved quickly to help Chloe into her shoes while keeping an eye on Liam, who ran to the swing set with unrestrained energy. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of grass and nearby trees, a brief reprieve from the predictable chaos inside. Sarah watched for a moment, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction as both children played safely under her supervision. Soon, Chloe began to fuss, wanting attention, and Liam asked for a snack again. Sarah navigated both needs seamlessly, offering Chloe a small biscuit while packing a few more items for Liam's continued play. She smiled softly at the way her children's personalities contrasted. Liam, bold, energetic, always moving, asking questions faster than she could answer them. Chloe, smaller, more curious about textures and colors, exploring the world at her own pace. Both kept her moving, alert, and engaged. And yet the rhythm of caring for them felt natural, a dance she had mastered through months of repetition. By late morning, Ethan appeared at the doorway, having returned early from work to drop off a package for a neighbor. His presence immediately shifted the household energy. Liam ran to greet him, squealing with delight, while Chloe reached out for his hands, eager to touch him. He knelt and engaged with the children, making silly faces and gentle noises, and Sarah felt a quiet relief wash over her. She moved to the kitchen, finishing preparations for lunch, while keeping an ear out for the inevitable small conflicts or requests that always arose when the children were together. Lunch passed with the usual blend of chaos and laughter. Chloe's food ended up more on her high chair and the floor than in her mouth, and Liam debated endlessly about what he wanted to eat first. Help guide them through the meal, offering suggestions and gentle discipline, while she cleaned up spills and prepared extra bites. The children's laughter and chatter filled the kitchen, blending with the clatter of utensils and the hum of the refrigerator. It was a familiar cacophony, the soundtrack of everyday family life. After lunch, the children were ready for another short burst of play. Sarah guided them outside again, watching as Liam ran across the yard, pretending the grass was a wide river and the slide a bridge over the water. Chloe toddled carefully behind him, fascinated by the texture of the grass beneath her feet. Sarah moved between them, adjusting shoes, redirecting wandering attention, and occasionally lifting Chloe when she stumbled. The air was fresh, and the sun shone warmly, giving Sarah a brief sense of renewal despite the physical fatigue she felt. Ethan joined briefly, tossing a ball to Liam and watching Chloe's fascination with the pile of leaves. Sarah noticed how naturally he interacted with the children, how his presence balanced hers, and she felt gratitude for the shared responsibility. Even in the midst of a long day, small moments like this reminded her why the effort mattered, why the constant vigilance and care had purpose beyond the immediate chores. By late afternoon, the children were tired again. Sarah led them inside for a snack, washing hands and arranging fruit slices and small crackers on their plates. Chloe began to fuss, demanding attention, and Liam asked questions about the shapes and colors of the food. Sarah answered and guided them, moving with quiet precision. Ethan joined her in the kitchen briefly, helping to tidy up a spill while speaking words of encouragement to her, a small but meaningful gesture. Soon, nap time approached. Sarah prepared Chloe's crib and Liam's small bed, ensuring both were comfortable. Chloe resisted for a moment, grabbing toys and babbling, but eventually settled as Sarah rocked her gently, whispering softly until her eyes closed. Liam, more easily persuaded, climbed into his bed and held his favorite blanket. Sarah and Ethan shared a brief smile at the sight, a reward for their coordinated efforts and patience. With the children finally asleep, Sarah sank into the living room chair, Ethan beside her. The house was calm again, the rare moments of peace stretching out like a soft blanket. They spoke quietly about small matters, the day's errands, the minor mishaps and fleeting moments of joy with the children. The sense of togetherness was profound, even without words, reinforced by the shared understanding of the daily rhythm they lived and navigated together. The quiet lasted only a short time before chores resumed. Sarah folded laundry, put away toys, and prepared for the evening, while Ethan tidied surfaces and coordinated with her to ensure the house was orderly. Though the day was long and exhausting, they moved in tandem, a practiced rhythm developed from months of shared responsibility. Each task, though small, carried significance, contributing to the smooth functioning of their family and home. Evening approached, the sky outside turning shades of orange and pink. Sarah prepared dinner while the children were still resting, timing the meal so that everyone could eat together once they awoke. She checked on Chloe and Liam briefly, ensuring they were comfortable before returning to the kitchen with renewed focus. The anticipation of Ethan's presence during the evening meal offered a small but meaningful comfort, the knowledge that the remainder of the day would be shared, not endured alone. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long, warm beams across the Miller living room. Sarah moved carefully among the scattered toys, soft blankets, and small cups left from the children's morning snacks. Liam and Chloe were still napping upstairs, and the house felt quieter than it had in hours. She paused for a moment to stretch, letting her shoulders roll back and her spine lengthen, feeling the subtle ache from the morning's activity gradually ease. The brief pause, however, was quickly replaced by the awareness that soon the children would wake and another wave of energy, demands, and care would follow. She moved into the kitchen to begin preparations for dinner, the smell of cooking oils and fresh vegetables filling the air as she washed and chopped. Ethan entered from the front door, removing his shoes and giving her a tired smile. "Everything okay?" he asked softly, noticing her quiet focus. Sarah nodded, managing a small smile, and Ethan dropped his briefcase on the counter before moving closer. "Need a hand?" he offered. She accepted, grateful, and together they began arranging ingredients, chopping, stirring, and coordinating tasks in an unspoken rhythm that had developed over months of shared household management. Upstairs, Liam stirred first, rubbing his eyes as he slowly woke from his nap. He called softly for his mother, his small voice echoing down the staircase. Sarah glanced at the clock and hurriedly wiped her hands on a towel before heading upstairs. Liam was sitting up in bed, blanket half tangled around his shoulders, still groggy but wide-eyed with curiosity. She bent down to help him into a small pair of socks and his favorite dinosaur shirt, brushing his hair back from his forehead and giving him a reassuring smile. "Time for a little snack, big guy," she said, guiding him gently down the stairs. Chloe woke next, babbling excitedly as Sarah lifted her from the crib. The little girl stretched her arms toward her mother, giggling softly. Sarah carried her downstairs, letting her explore the living room for a few moments before guiding her toward the kitchen. Chloe's small feet padded across the floor, occasionally tripping over a stray toy, and Sarah's hands were quick to catch her before she stumbled. Liam sat on the rug, already nibbling on a small piece of fruit Sarah had prepared. Chloe followed suit, clapping her hands with delight at the taste of something sweet. The late afternoon hours were a delicate balance of managing the children's needs while continuing dinner preparations. Sarah stirred the sauce gently on the stove while keeping an eye on Chloe and Liam, redirecting spilled fruit and dropped utensils with practiced patience. Ethan joined in by fetching a small plate, offering water, and occasionally making silly faces to keep the children entertained. The room was alive with energy, a mixture of chatter, laughter, and the soft clatter of plates and utensils against countertops. Despite the fatigue pressing against her shoulders and legs, Sarah moved fluidly through the tasks, her mind focused and alert. Once dinner was nearly ready, Sarah guided the children to wash their hands, explaining in simple terms why it was important. Liam splashed water across the sink with an enthusiasm only a 4-year-old could muster, while Chloe watched intently, trying to mimic his movements. Sarah and Ethan exchanged a brief smile, recognizing the chaos but also the moments of joy it brought. Dinner plates were filled and placed carefully on the table, Liam reaching eagerly for his favorite dish, while Chloe clapped her hands with excitement. The family gathered around the table, the warm glow of the overhead light filling the room. Conversation flowed freely, punctuated by the children's laughter and occasional small complaints about the temperature of food or which fork to use. Sarah guided them patiently, offering bites and encouragement, while Ethan made small jokes to entertain the children and keep the mood light. Even in the midst of the mess and noise, there was a profound sense of togetherness, a reminder of why every exhausting task, every spill, and every tantrum was worth the effort. After dinner, cleanup began. Sarah and Ethan worked in tandem, washing dishes, wiping counters, and putting leftover food into containers. Liam and Chloe played nearby, occasionally dropping toys or asking for assistance, and Sarah responded with gentle guidance. The rhythm of cleanup, though repetitive, was comforting in its familiarity, a predictable pattern after the unstructured chaos of the day. The house slowly regained order as the children's energy gradually waned. Soon it was time for the children's bedtime routine. Sarah prepared Chloe's bath, while Ethan helped Liam change into pajamas. Chloe giggled as water splashed gently around her, reaching for the floating toys Sarah placed within reach. Liam brushed his teeth carefully, showing his growing independence, while Sarah and Ethan offered guidance and praise. By the time the children were tucked into bed, both were content and ready to sleep. Sarah lingered in their rooms for a few moments, smoothing blankets and offering quiet words of reassurance, enjoying the small peace that followed a long, active day. With the children finally asleep, Sarah and Ethan returned to the living room. They sank into the couch, their movements slow and deliberate, exhausted but relieved. Ethan reached for Sarah's hand, squeezing gently. "We did it," he murmured. She leaned against his shoulder, letting the warmth of his presence soak in. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floors settling. In these moments, Sarah allowed herself to breathe, to reflect on the day, and to feel the quiet satisfaction of having navigated the countless small challenges with grace and patience. They stayed together for a while, speaking softly about the day's events, sharing laughter over minor mishaps, and celebrating the small victories. Though the work of parenting never truly ended, These brief interludes of calm reminded them of the purpose behind every exhausting task, every spill, and every tantrum. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the last streaks of light across the neighborhood. Inside, the house hummed with the quiet energy of a family at rest, the children sleeping soundly, and the parents savoring a well-earned moment of peace before the next day began. The morning began slowly, with soft sunlight spilling through the windows, painting the Miller living room in pale gold. Sarah rose first, careful not to disturb the quiet, feeling the lingering fatigue from the previous day settle into her muscles. The house was still. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed softer in the early hour. She stretched lightly, taking a deep breath, knowing it would not last long before the children awoke and the routine began again. Liam was the first to stir, his small voice calling softly from his bedroom. Sarah moved quickly to his side, lifting the blanket from his shoulders and brushing his hair back from his forehead. He blinked sleepily at her, stretching his small arms upward. "Good morning, buddy," she whispered, helping him climb out of bed. Together, they went downstairs, where Chloe had already begun to babble softly from her crib, reaching out for Sarah's arms. Sarah lifted her carefully, balancing the toddler on her hip as Liam trailed behind, still rubbing his eyes. Breakfast was a coordinated effort, Sarah moving between the stove, the high chair, and the dining table. Liam wanted cereal, Chloe preferred fruit, and both were impatient in their own ways. Ethan appeared from the front door, having returned from an early errand, briefly greeting Sarah before kneeling down to greet the children. Liam ran to him immediately, Chloe reaching out with tiny hands. Sarah scooped Chloe into his arms while Sarah prepared small portions of fruit and toast. The kitchen filled with soft chatter, giggles, and the occasional minor protest over who got which piece of fruit. After breakfast, Sarah ushered the children outside. Liam darted toward the slide with boundless energy, while Chloe toddled behind, fascinated by every leaf, stone, and patch of grass she could touch. Sarah moved between them, keeping Chloe safe and redirecting her curiosity when it became unsafe, while Ethan joined in, tossing a ball to Liam and making gentle faces to amuse Chloe. The backyard, bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun, felt momentarily peaceful, a reprieve from the constant chaos of indoor life. Soon, the children's attention shifted again. Liam began pretending the slide was a mountain and the grass a rushing river, running across the yard with dramatic leaps. Chloe attempted to mimic him, her small legs wobbling beneath her, and Sarah stayed close, ready to catch or guide her. Ethan laughed quietly, helping Liam create a bridge with fallen sticks and encouraging both children to explore safely. The small interactions, filled with creativity and play, reminded Sarah of the joy hidden within the repetitive chaos of daily parenting. By mid-morning, the children were ready for a snack. Sarah guided them inside, washing hands and preparing small plates of crackers and fruit slices. Chloe reached for her snack eagerly, Liam asked for an extra piece, and Sarah distributed the food while keeping her eyes on their movements. The kitchen was a flurry of activity, with crumbs dropping, utensils clattering, and the children's voices filling the room. Ethan helped by offering water and redirecting small disagreements, a steady presence that balanced Sarah's constant motion. Nap time approached soon after. Sarah prepared Chloe's crib and Liam's bed, ensuring each child was comfortable. Chloe protested briefly, grabbing a stuffed toy and reaching for her mother, but eventually settled after Sarah whispered softly and rocked her for a few moments. Liam, slightly older and more independent, climbed into his bed with a blanket in hand, content to watch the shadows on the ceiling until sleep overtook him. Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief, knowing the house would finally be quiet for a short period. With the children asleep, Sarah returned to the kitchen to prepare lunch. Ethan joined her, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces in tandem. Their movements were quiet, coordinated, and efficient, a rhythm developed over months of shared responsibility. Occasionally, they exchanged a glance or a soft smile, acknowledging the subtle triumphs of managing both the household and their children. The hum of the kitchen and the soft clatter of utensils created a background that was almost meditative, a small pocket of calm in the constant ebb and flow of family life. Lunch was served, and soon the children awoke, stretching and yawning, still carrying the remnants of dreams in their sleepy eyes. Liam ran to the table first. Chloe toddled behind, reaching for her plate. The meal was lively, filled with questions, laughter, and the occasional minor complaint about taste or texture. Sarah and Ethan guided them patiently, offering small bites and encouragement, moving between tasks while keeping the children engaged and safe. The interplay of responsibilities, teaching, and care was seamless yet exhausting, a familiar rhythm they had mastered through repetition. After lunch, the afternoon stretched long, filled with a mixture of play, learning, and small household chores. Liam wanted to draw with crayons, Chloe was fascinated by blocks, and both required constant attention and supervision. Sarah guided each child, offering help, praise, and gentle correction as needed. Ethan assisted by moving small obstacles from the children's path and offering support in teaching Liam new games and ideas. The house was alive with energy, laughter, and occasional small mishaps, a testament to the demanding but rewarding nature of parenting. By late afternoon, the family moved into the backyard again. Liam's energy seemed boundless as he raced across the grass, pretending to be a superhero, while Chloe toddled after him, squealing with delight. Sarah followed closely, ensuring both children were safe while maintaining the flow of play. Ethan joined in, tossing a small ball, guiding imaginary adventures, and encouraging creativity. The warm glow of the sun and the cool breeze combined to create a perfect setting for these brief moments of peace and joy amidst the otherwise exhausting day. Evening approached, and Sarah began preparations for dinner. The children were tired but still playful, requiring careful supervision as they moved between toys and small tasks. Ethan helped coordinate, offering guidance and support, while Sarah handled the cooking and the ever-present cleanup. Together, they worked efficiently, their shared rhythm easing the weight of the day's labor. The house, though filled with energy, also held small moments of quiet satisfaction as each task was completed and the children's needs were met. By the time dinner was served, the family gathered around the table. The room was filled with conversation, laughter, and the occasional minor complaint. Sarah and Ethan guided the children with gentle patience, helping them navigate small frustrations while enjoying the shared joy of mealtime. Chloe's small hands reached eagerly for food, Liam chattered animatedly about the day's events, and Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction at the successful management of another long and active day. After dinner, cleanup began. Dishes were washed, surfaces wiped, toys returned to their places, and the last scraps of food swept away. The children, now ready for bed, were guided through their routine: baths, pajamas, brushing their teeth, and final stories. Sarah and Ethan worked together, balancing attention and guidance, ensuring each child was comfortable, happy, and ready to sleep. With the children finally in bed, Sarah and Ethan returned to the living room. They sank into the couch, shoulders leaning against each other, bodies heavy but hearts light. The quiet of the evening settled over them, the house finally at rest. They spoke softly, sharing small reflections on the day, celebrating minor victories, and acknowledging the effort required to manage their family and household. In these moments, Sarah allowed herself to breathe, feeling the profound weight and joy of parenthood, knowing that tomorrow would bring more of the same, but that they would face it together. The first light of morning filtered softly through the curtains, gently waking the Miller household. Sarah stirred, stretching her arms and shoulders as she rose from bed. Her body ached faintly from the previous day, but the fatigue was familiar, a constant companion that came with caring for young children. She paused for a moment in the quiet, savoring the calm before the inevitable storm of energy, questions, and tiny demands. Soon, Liam's small voice called from his bedroom, sleepy but insistent. Sarah moved quickly, climbing the stairs to help him out of bed. He rubbed his eyes and yawned, then reached for her hand. Together, they descended the staircase, careful not to wake Chloe prematurely. The little girl had already stirred, babbling softly from her crib. Sarah lifted her gently, balancing her on her hip while keeping an eye on Liam as he followed, still drowsy but eager to start the day. Breakfast was a coordinated dance, Sarah moving between the stove, the high chair, and the dining table. Liam demanded cereal, Chloe preferred fruit, and both were impatient in their own ways. Ethan appeared from the front door, returning from an early work task, and quickly joined the morning routine. He knelt down to greet the children, scooping Chloe into his arms while Liam ran toward him. The kitchen filled with laughter, chatter, and minor protests over food choices. But Sarah and Ethan navigated it seamlessly, moving between tasks with practiced precision. After breakfast, Sarah led the children outside. Liam immediately ran toward the slide, his imagination already in motion. Chloe toddled behind, fascinated by every leaf, stone, and shadow on the ground. Sarah moved between them, ensuring Chloe's safety while redirecting her curiosity when needed. Ethan joined in, tossing a small ball to Liam and encouraging Chloe to explore the yard safely. The warm morning sun and the cool breeze created a momentary sense of peace, a rare reprieve from the constant demands inside the house. The children's attention shifted as they played, each exploring their own little worlds. Liam pretended the slide was a mountain to climb, jumping off and running across the grass with boundless energy. Chloe toddled behind him, fascinated by the texture of the grass beneath her feet. Sarah stayed close, guiding Chloe's small movements and ensuring Liam didn't run too far. Ethan helped by creating imaginary obstacles and games, engaging both children and keeping the play dynamic and safe. These small moments of laughter and exploration reminded Sarah of the joy hidden within the relentless routine of parenting. By mid-morning, the children needed a snack. Sarah guided them inside, washing hands and preparing small portions of fruit and crackers. Chloe eagerly reached for her food, while Liam asked for extras, testing Sarah's patience in the gentle, persistent way children do. Ethan helped distribute snacks and offered water, quietly supporting Sarah while keeping the children entertained. The kitchen was alive with energy and noise, yet Sarah felt a subtle sense of satisfaction in managing the chaos and maintaining some order. Nap time arrived shortly after, and Sarah prepared Chloe's crib and Liam's bed. Chloe protested briefly, grabbing a toy and reaching for her mother, but Sarah soothed her with gentle words and a few minutes of rocking. Liam climbed into his bed without resistance, clutching his favorite blanket and pillow. Sarah allowed herself a small sigh of relief, knowing the house would be quiet, if only briefly. With the children resting, Sarah returned to the kitchen to begin lunch preparations. Ethan joined her, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces in tandem. Their movements were quiet, coordinated, and efficient, reflecting months of shared responsibility. Occasional glances and soft smiles acknowledged the subtle triumphs of managing both the household and the children's needs. The rhythmic sounds of cooking, clattering utensils, and the soft hum of appliances filled the room, offering a brief meditative moment amidst the demands of family life. When the children awoke, Sarah guided them to the table for lunch. Liam's energy was immediately apparent as he jumped and fidgeted in his chair, while Chloe clapped her hands with delight at the sight of food. Conversation, laughter, and the occasional minor protest over food choices filled the air. Sarah and Ethan offered guidance, gentle correction, and encouragement, ensuring both children remained engaged and content. The interplay of care, teaching, and patience was continuous, exhausting yet rewarding. After lunch, the afternoon stretched long, a combination of playtime and small household chores. Liam wanted to build towers with blocks, Chloe was fascinated by the colors and textures of toys, and both required constant attention and redirection. Sarah guided their activities, while Ethan helped by clearing small obstacles and providing support with games and learning. The house hummed with energy, laughter, and minor mishaps, yet beneath the chaos lay a profound sense of family connection and shared purpose. By late afternoon, the children's energy shifted toward outdoor play. Liam ran across the yard, pretending to be a superhero, while Chloe toddled behind him, squealing with delight. Sarah monitored both, guiding Chloe's curiosity and ensuring safety, while Ethan engaged Liam in imaginative adventures. The warm sun and the gentle breeze created an idyllic backdrop for these brief moments of calm and joy, even as fatigue weighed heavily on Sarah's shoulders. Evening approached, and Sarah began preparations for dinner. The children, though tired, remained playful and required supervision. Ethan helped coordinate, assisting Sarah in cooking and maintaining order. The household rhythm, though exhausting, allowed small moments of peace and satisfaction to emerge amidst the demands of parenting. Dinner was served, and the family gathered around the table. Conversation, laughter, and minor disputes over food choices filled the room. Sarah and Ethan guided the children patiently, offering encouragement, discipline, and praise. The meal was both a test of patience and a celebration of their daily efforts. Chloe clapped her hands in delight, Liam animatedly described his imaginary adventures, and Sarah felt the quiet satisfaction of having navigated another long, active day. After dinner, cleanup began. Sarah and Ethan worked together, washing dishes, wiping surfaces, and organizing toys. The children were guided through their bedtime routine: baths, pajamas, brushing teeth, and final stories. Each step required attention, patience, and care, yet the family moved through it with a practiced rhythm. Finally, the children were asleep, and the house quiet, and the Miller parents could sit together in the living room. They sank into the couch, shoulders leaning against each other, bodies heavy but hearts light. The quiet of the evening settled over them like a soft blanket. They spoke in hushed tones, reflecting on the day's events, laughing quietly over small mishaps, and celebrating minor victories. Outside, the sky grew dark and the neighborhood fell silent. Inside, the house hummed gently with warmth and safety, the children sleeping soundly, and the parents sharing a moment of peace before the cycle began anew. The morning light spilled gently into the Miller home, casting soft golden hues across the living room. Sarah awoke first, the faint ache in her shoulders reminding her of the countless days spent caring for her children. She paused for a moment, savoring the quiet before Liam and Chloe began their usual morning bustle. These quiet moments, though fleeting, had become precious to her, a chance to gather strength before the day began anew. Liam was the first to stir, his small voice calling softly from upstairs. Sarah climbed the stairs, brushing his hair back as he rubbed his eyes. "Good morning, my brave boy," she whispered. He clutched her hand, following her carefully downstairs. Chloe had already awakened, babbling softly from her crib. Sarah lifted her gently, placing her on her hip as Liam trailed behind, still half asleep but ready for breakfast. The kitchen filled with soft chatter as Sarah prepared food for the children. Ethan appeared shortly after, returning from an early errand, his presence immediately adding balance and calm to the household. He knelt to greet Chloe, lifting her into his arms, while Liam ran to him, sharing an excited story about a dream he had. Breakfast passed in a blend of laughter, minor disputes over bites of food, and the gentle rhythm of a family functioning together. After breakfast, the children were eager to play outside. Liam ran toward the slide with boundless energy, pretending the grass was a rushing river and the slide a tall mountain. Chloe toddled behind, fascinated by every leaf, stone, and shadow. Sarah moved between them, ensuring Chloe's safety and guiding her exploration. Ethan joined in, tossing a ball to Liam and encouraging both children's imagination to flourish. The morning air was crisp and sweet, carrying the scent of the garden and the warmth of sunlight, a brief pocket of calm amid the usual chaos. The day unfolded in its familiar rhythm: snacks, laughter, minor disagreements, and playful adventures. Sarah navigated each task with practiced patience, attending to spilled fruit, scattered toys, and the endless questions that came from Liam's curious mind. Ethan supported her seamlessly, redirecting small conflicts, offering encouragement, and ensuring that the household ran smoothly. Together, they formed a quiet but unbreakable partnership, balancing responsibilities and love in a way that made the challenges of parenting feel possible. By afternoon, the children were ready for a nap. Sarah prepared Chloe's crib while Ethan helped Liam settle into his small bed. Chloe protested briefly, reaching for her mother, but was soothed after a few gentle moments. Liam, more independent, clutched his blanket and pillow, drifting off into peaceful sleep. Sarah allowed herself a small sigh, enjoying the rare stillness and the fleeting sense of accomplishment that came from successfully managing the day so far. When the children awoke, Sarah guided them to a simple lunch. The kitchen was alive with energy once more. Liam chattered constantly, Chloe clapped her hands in delight, and Sarah and Ethan moved efficiently between tasks. Small victories, a bite eaten without fuss, a toy returned to its place, and laughter shared reminded them of the rewards hidden within the exhausting routine of family life. The afternoon passed with play, small chores, and quiet moments of teaching. Liam built towers of blocks, while Chloe explored textures and colors, both requiring constant attention. Sarah guided each child patiently, while Ethan assisted with coordination and encouragement. The house hummed with activity, chaos, and love. Every small interaction, a thread weaving the fabric of their family life. As evening approached, Sarah began preparing dinner while Ethan coordinated with the children to set the table and tidy the play areas. The warm glow of the kitchen lights illuminated the room as laughter and conversation flowed freely. Dinner was served, and the family gathered around the table. Liam animatedly shared the highlights of his day, Chloe babbled happily, and Sarah and Ethan guided them through the meal with patience and joy. The clatter of utensils, the occasional minor complaint, and the bursts of laughter created a symphony of family life, ordinary yet extraordinary in its own way. After dinner, cleanup and bedtime routines followed. Baths, pajamas, brushing teeth, and story time carried the children gently into sleep. Sarah and Ethan worked together seamlessly, balancing attention and care, ensuring that both Liam and Chloe were comfortable, secure, and content. When the children were finally asleep, the house fell into a rare quiet, filled with the soft hum of appliances and the warmth of the evening light. Sarah and Ethan sank into the couch together, their bodies heavy with fatigue, but their hearts light. The day had been long, demanding, and exhausting, yet filled with moments of joy, connection, and love. They exchanged quiet words, reflecting on the day, sharing laughter over minor mishaps, and celebrating the small victories that marked another successful day of parenting. Outside, the sky deepened to shades of midnight blue, stars beginning to twinkle faintly. Inside, the house felt safe, warm, and alive with love, even in the stillness. For a long moment, Sarah rested her head against Ethan's shoulder. They sat together quietly, savoring the rare moments of peace that bookended the endless rhythm of daily life. They didn't need to speak to understand each other. Every glance, every touch, and every shared smile conveyed the depth of their partnership. The children slept soundly upstairs, unaware of the care, patience, and love that had carried them through another day. Finally, as the house settled into complete quiet, Sarah and Ethan rose, turning off the lights and checking briefly on the children. They stood together in the doorway, taking one last look at their sleeping children, and shared a soft, exhausted smile. The day was complete. In the peaceful silence of their home, Sarah and Ethan returned to their bedroom. They fell into bed side by side, bodies weary but hearts full, knowing that each day, no matter how demanding, was worth it for the love, laughter, and life they shared with their children. Outside, the world was still. Inside, their family rested, complete, and whole. The challenges would return with the morning, as they always did. But for now, the Miller family was quiet, safe, and together. The house exhaled with them, and for this night at least, everything was perfect.